First of all, Minsok, thank you so much for being with us today. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your role and how you've navigated Mondelêz through the COVID crisis.
So I'm the Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer. I lead our strategy development, planning, our mergers and acquisitions, e-commerce, and our digital initiatives. And, you know, the early days of the pandemic, every day was something new, and it was completely unpredictable. Day one, it could be a supplier having an issue, getting delivery out of the port, might be logistics problems or transportation shutdowns, government shutdowns, retailers closing doors. And it became very evident very early on that we had two priorities. First was to ensure the safety and health of all our employees. And that meant that we listened to the science, we worked with the medical professionals to put in place the robust safety protocols in all our facilities around the world. The second thing was we had to make sure that our plants were operational and that our business was up and running so that folks could get their favorite Oreos, their products that they loved, and make sure that we had those available to them. And what that meant was we had to adapt. We had to be extremely agile, flexible at the local level so that our teams could respond to all the uncertainties that were thrown at them on a day-to-day basis. The other thing we had to do is, of course, we had to support our employees to work and operate in a completely new environment and new normal in ways that we hadn't done before.
What sort of investments did you have to make around technology, for instance, to get the supply chain, you mentioned a number of times, running, because you were able to keep that going, to keep the stores and the shelves stocked? How did you do that, and where did you have to invest?
Technology and digital really touches on all parts of our business, from the way that we communicate and connect with consumers, the way that we work with our customers, and of course, how we run our supply chain. One example in the way that we use technology during the pandemic was we used predictive analytics to identify potential COVID hotspots at a very local level where all of our plants and distribution centers were. And this allowed us to plan ahead and to put in place the contingency plans to make sure that we were keeping our people safe and make sure that we were addressing the likely issues so that we could keep our plants running. So the predictive analytics came in, it had a huge impact on how we were able to identify potential hotspots.
What are they showing right now?
Well, what they're showing right now is there's still quite a bit of uncertainty, right? And what you see in different markets is a resurgence in cases. You see other places starting to plateau. I think on top of that, we have to look at the potential outlook for vaccine availability and how the economy is going to respond around the world and what the impact on GDP growth will look like. So we're taking all of these factors into consideration, and you know, these models are very dynamic, and these are things that we have to update on a regular basis.
What about the consumer side of things? We have seen such a rapid shift in terms of e-commerce for everything, including consumer staples like food. What are you seeing on that front, and how have you pivoted your business to address how rapid this shift has happened?
The shift online for food has been incredibly rapid. We went from in the neighborhood of 3% penetration online in the U.S. to more than 6-7% in a matter of months, what would have taken years. And so that was a dramatic shift. And we were already making investments in e-commerce coming into this year. Our e-commerce business last year, for example, grew more than 30%. But as the pandemic shifted consumer shopping behavior, we saw this as an opportunity to accelerate that component of our strategy. So we did everything from working with our retail partners to ensure product availability, to put together exciting offers and campaigns for consumers. We invested in our supply chain capability to be able to fulfill e-commerce packs. We also saw this as a unique opportunity to engage more directly with our consumers through our direct-to-consumer sites, our D2C sites. and to offer consumers something unique that they may not be able to find elsewhere. So as an example, our Sour Patch Kids site, you can go on sourpatchkids.com and customize a pack for you. So if you like all blue, you can get a pack that's all blue. If you want half and half, so blue and red, you can do that as well. So we use this as an opportunity to, again, invest in our e-commerce technology, our e-commerce platforms, to not only meet the consumer demand, but also to enhance that one-to-one relationship we have with our consumers through some of our direct consumer sites.
It sounds great for my picky toddler who only eats green color candy. Probably shouldn't eat candy at all, Minsok. What about what you're seeing in terms of the data on consumer habits, what they're buying, how things have changed since the pandemic? How do you get a glimpse into that, and how does it shift what you're focused on?
One of the things that we have seen is that consumers have shifted and are really leaning on brands that they know and they trust, brands that give them comfort and bring them joy during these really uncertain times. So some of our global brands like Oreo, Ritz, Cadbury chocolates, and we see them coming to these brands and really relying on them. So there's been a big shift to that. We're also seeing that as consumers spend more time at home, they're buying bigger bundles, bigger packs, and so we're having to make sure that we meet the demands for the different pack sizes available. And of course, during these times, we all worry about not overeating, over snacking. And well-being is an important part of our strategy. It has been a critical component in our strategy to make sure that we are providing the choices and the options for consumers to snack right. And that is a purpose. It's a higher purpose for us to enable consumers to snack right. And so we're working within many of our brands to make sure that we're providing a better portion control, reducing sugar, for example, the 30% in the sugar Cadbury chocolate, organic ingredients in our Triscuits products. So all these things that we're doing within our portfolio to enable consumers to snack right and give them the choices to snack more healthy.
Do consumers spend more money when they buy online?
Many studies suggest that consumers who are omni shoppers, who shop online as well as in store, that their baskets are larger and they tend to spend more over time. And and that's something that I think retailers have seen. And what we see is, of course, that the online shoppers, they do tend to buy more products. You're not going online just to buy a single packet of Oreos. You're generally buying that, in conjunction with other things.
Also, your workforce, Minsok, you mentioned that the factories have to stay up and running so that you can keep the supply coming in. What about the rest of Mondelêz? How many people are working at home, and how have you had to adapt and shift the operations?
One of the early concerns was how do we keep our entire employee base connected through the pandemic? Because very quickly around the world, and we operate in every part of the world, we had to go remote, and with countries locking down, people were working from home. And so the concern was, how do we keep people engaged? How do we keep people connected? And we invested quite a bit in the technology to allow for virtual meetings, to allow for remote collaboration, communication, et cetera. But the thing that I've been incredibly encouraged to see is how we are using that technology to stay connected in some ways even more than ever, and to really live our culture and values around support and sharing. So as an example, one of our facilities had the employees there took an initiative for a mask drive where they made masks for the community. Mm-hmm. And when that story got picked up on our internal social media network, that news just spread like wildfire, and we had teams from all over the world doing something similar. Another example of how people were using the tools to share you may have heard about the Oreo challenge. This is where you put the Oreo on your forehead and try to get it in your mouth without using your hands. And that became a challenge and a competition internally. And we had folks from all over the world posting videos and people commenting and giving tips and things like this. And an interesting thing that my team started to do was how we used the virtual meetings to invite each other into each other's homes more. And so we would have meetings with kids at our sides, or got to meet the family pets. And so it was really encouraging to see how we're using the technology during the pandemic to stay connected even more than we had before.
Finally, Minsok, as we're talking to a group of CIOs and CTOs, what are the biggest lessons you learned that will inform the way you make decisions going forward?
This may sound trite, Sarah, but I think it is to expect the unexpected. There were so many things that we never expected could happen and that we just took for granted, right? We took for granted that stores were always going to be open. We took for granted that transportation systems would work. Right? We took for granted that ports would stay open. And what we learned was that you can't take any of these things for granted. And what the pandemic allowed us to do was look at every part of our business, all of our different facilities, our different functions, and identify those factors, those variables that could swing the business the most, that have the biggest impact, and develop the framework around how we deal with those situations, and to develop those playbooks, and think about how we instill and encourage the agility in the organization to be able to respond to any one of these disruptive events. It could be a pandemic, it could be a natural disaster, it could be a political insurrection. All these things have an impact on our business. And now that we've got the frameworks in place and the playbooks in place, I think we're in a much better position.
So no Oreo shortages ever. Is that something you're promising?
I hope that if you ever find yourself in a position where you can't find household products and toilet paper, you'll at least get your Oreos.
Thank you very much. Minsok, great to talk to you.
Thank you, Sarah.